In every organization, there comes a point when you realize that the environment you're in doesn't reflect the best version of who you are. The tone, the energy, the way people treat each other, something feels off. You start to notice that conversations are filled with tension, that silence feels safer than honesty, that people compete more than they collaborate. The instinct for many is to want to fix it all, to challenge leadership, to call out behavior, to demand change. But there's a quiet truth we often overlook. We can't always change the culture around us, but we can always choose how we behave within it. The power of influence doesn't come from authority, it comes from example. When you walk into a toxic environment, you have a choice to make every single day. You can mirror what you see, or you can model what you believe. Most people adapt to survive, but very few choose to influence by staying consistent with their values. It's easy to think that one person can't make a difference in a place where negativity dominates, but influence is not about changing everyone. It's about creating a ripple. Small, quiet, consistent actions begin to challenge the norms that toxicity feeds on. When everyone is gossiping, you choose not to. When everyone blames, you take responsibility. When others compete, you collaborate. Those moments matter more than they appear because culture is the sum of small behaviors repeated over time. Influence is not loud. It doesn't demand attention. It shows up through how you treat people, how you listen, how you react under pressure. When people see that your behavior stays the same, regardless of who's watching, they start to trust you. And trust is the beginning of influence. Toxicity thrives where fear controls people's actions. But when someone consistently operates from calm confidence and integrity, it disrupts that pattern. Others begin to feel that maybe there's another way to be. Maybe the culture doesn't have to define them. It starts with one person who refuses to participate in the negativity. In a toxic culture, it's tempting to withdraw and protect yourself. You stop caring, stop connecting, stop engaging. But isolation only feeds the problem. Influence happens when you stay engaged, when you show empathy even when it's not reciprocated. You don't have to agree with everything, but you can choose to stay human. Because toxicity dehumanizes, it turns people into numbers, threats, or tools. The antidote is simple human decency. Look people in the eye. Ask how they're doing and mean it. Give credit. Acknowledge effort. Show gratitude. These are not soft gestures. They're the foundation of healthy culture. You may not have the authority to make systemic changes, but you can shift the atmosphere in your circle. Influence doesn't always show visible results right away. It's slow, quiet, and often thankless. But the people who choose to act differently, who stay kind in harsh environments, who listen in rooms full of noise, who hold on to integrity when everyone else lets go, those people become the anchors that others depend on. And that's how cultural change begins. Not through policies or announcements, but through the daily example of someone who chose not to mirror the toxicity around them. There's a misconception that leadership comes from authority, that only those at the top of an organization have the power to shape its culture. But real leadership has never been about titles. It's not written on your business card or your door. It's written in your behavior. Leadership is revealed in how you show up when things go wrong, in how you treat people who can't offer you anything, and in how you take responsibility when no one else will. A toxic culture exists when authority replaces leadership, when people in power prioritize control over care. But leadership begins the moment someone decides to do what's right, not what's easy. In a toxic environment, fear drives behavior. People play safe, stay quiet, and avoid taking risks. Leadership in that context is the courage to create safety where there is none. It's asking someone's opinion in a meeting where voices are usually ignored. It's defending a colleague who's being mistreated. It's admitting when you made a mistake instead of deflecting blame. Those small choices build trust, and trust is the currency of real leadership. The paradox is that leadership is most visible when no one is watching. It's not about recognition. It's about responsibility. Being a leader without a title means you're willing to be the person who sets a different tone. You start conversations that others avoid. You approach problems with empathy instead of ego. You take interest in people, not just performance. Toxic cultures often reward outcomes, not behavior, but real leadership knows that sustainable success comes from people who feel safe and valued. When people feel seen and respected, they give their best, not out of fear, But out of trust, leadership in these environments doesn't mean standing on a stage or giving speeches. It's shown in the way you walk through the hallways, how you handle frustration, and how you react when someone fails. When you choose to guide instead of criticize, to encourage instead of compete, to listen instead of dominate, you redefine what leadership looks like. You create small pockets of safety, and people start to gather around that energy. The presence of one true leader can transform the feeling of an entire team, not because they demand it, but because they embody it. In cultures where authority is abused, people stop believing in leaders. They see leadership as manipulation or power. But when someone acts with honesty, humility, and consistency, it restores belief that leadership can be something good. It shows that integrity still matters, that decency still has a place, that there's another way to operate. And that's the kind of influence that lasts longer than any title or position. In every workplace, healthy or toxic, trust is the invisible thread holding everything together. It's what allows people to take risks, to speak up, to innovate, and to collaborate without fear. But in a toxic culture, that thread is usually torn. People walk on eggshells. They hide mistakes. They avoid vulnerability because they've learned that honesty can be punished and that weakness can be used against them. What most don't realize is that trust doesn't need grand gestures to be rebuilt. It needs small, consistent human actions done quietly over time. Trust begins when words and actions match, when people say what they mean and mean what they say. It's in showing up on time, in following through on promises, in keeping confidence. When someone shares something in private, it's not the big, visible acts that rebuild trust. It's the subtle ones. Toxic environments train people to be skeptical. They've seen too many promises broken, too many leaders say one thing and do another. So when someone shows up with consistency, when someone becomes predictable in their integrity, people notice. It's rare, and rarity builds respect. You build trust when you admit you don't have all the answers. When you're willing to say, I don't know, instead of pretending you do. It shows humility, and humility is disarming in an environment built on ego. You build trust when you give credit freely, when you celebrate others' wins without envy. In toxic cultures, credit is currency. People hoard it because they think it defines their worth. But the moment someone starts sharing it, they shift the dynamic from competition to collaboration. Trust thrives in generosity. Consistency is what makes trust sustainable. Anyone can act kind once. Anyone can show empathy once. But when you do it every day, especially when it's not convenient, that's when people start to rely on you. They begin to believe that you are who you appear to be. And that belief is powerful, because in environments where trust is broken, people are constantly scanning for authenticity. They've learned not to believe words, they believe patterns. They don't trust perfection, they trust honesty. Building trust doesn't mean you'll always be liked. Sometimes it means telling hard truths, holding boundaries, or calling out what's wrong when everyone else stays silent. Trust isn't built through avoidance. It's built through courage. When people see that your motives are genuine, even your criticism feels safe, because trust doesn't come from pleasing everyone. It comes from showing that you care enough to be real. Toxicity isolates. It convinces people to focus only on themselves, to protect their own survival. But trust is an act of connection. It's built when you ask someone how they're really doing and then take the time to listen to the answer. It's built when you help a colleague without expecting anything in return. It's built when you take responsibility for your part in a failure instead of pointing fingers. Every one of those actions sends a signal, you can feel safe with me. And that safety, repeated over time, becomes the foundation for real culture. Trust grows slowly and dies quickly. It's fragile, but it's also resilient when nurtured. In a toxic workplace, one trusted person can become a lifeline. When people know there's someone they can turn to, someone who listens without judgment, who shows up with integrity, it gives them hope. And hope is contagious. The more people begin to trust, the less room toxicity has to breathe. Building trust doesn't require permission. You don't need a title, authority, or a policy to do it. You just need to decide that you will show up consistently as someone who can be counted on. You can't control whether others will match that energy, but you can control whether you continue to live by it. And every time you do, you pull one thread of trust back into the fabric of the culture around you. When you're surrounded by a toxic work culture, it's easy to start believing that you're alone. You look around and see people disengaged, fearful, or cynical. You start to wonder if you're the only one who still cares, the only one who still believes in doing the right thing. Toxicity isolates. It convinces you that resistance is futile, that kindness won't matter, that integrity is weakness. But that's a lie. No one changes culture alone, but no culture changes at all without someone starting. And the first step toward that change is finding allies, people who share your values, who see the world the way you do, who are willing to quietly stand for something better. You don't need an army to shift an environment. You just need a few people who are willing to believe that decency is still possible. These allies might not be obvious at first. In fact, in toxic environments, most people hide their true selves to survive. They nod along in meetings. They stay quiet when something feels wrong. They blend in. But underneath that, many are just waiting for someone to give them permission to care again. They're waiting to see someone lead by example. And when you begin to behave differently, with empathy, patience, and authenticity, you send a signal that it's safe to do the same. Slowly, those people start to reveal themselves. You find each other not through words, but through shared behavior. When you connect with people who value integrity over image, it changes everything. You build small pockets of safety, micro, cultures within the larger organization. In these spaces, you can be honest. You can admit mistakes. You can share frustrations without fear of punishment. You can celebrate wins without jealousy. These micro-cultures are powerful because they remind people what healthy feels like. They become a mirror of what the larger culture could be if more people lived by those principles. You can't fix the whole company overnight, but you can make your corner of it a better place to work. And sometimes that's where transformation begins. In every toxic system, there are small groups of people who quietly support each other, who protect each other's energy, who encourage each other to stay human. They might meet for coffee and talk honestly about what's happening. They might share small acts of kindness, a thank you note, an encouraging message, a moment of humor in the middle of chaos. These gestures may seem small, but they have deep impact. They create a sense of belonging in a place where most people feel disconnected, and belonging gives people strength. Building a microculture of trust doesn't mean forming a clique or isolating yourself from everyone else. It means being intentional about the kind of energy you surround yourself with. It means spending time with those who remind you of your values, not those who drain them. It's about reinforcing what's good so that toxicity doesn't consume you. You can be kind without being naive, strong without being cruel, hopeful without being blind. The people around you matter because their energy becomes your atmosphere. Choose that atmosphere wisely. Allies are not just people who agree with you. They're people who hold you accountable to your best self. In difficult moments, they remind you why you started. They give you perspective when frustration clouds your judgment. They keep you grounded in the belief that the way we treat others still matters. And in return, you do the same for them. That's how microcultures survive through mutual care and shared responsibility. In time, others begin to notice that there's something different about your team, your group, your little circle. They see collaboration instead of competition, calm instead of chaos, support instead of fear. People are drawn to that energy because everyone, deep down, wants to work in an environment where they feel valued. What starts as a small group of people trying to stay kind in a harsh environment can grow into a model of what culture could look like at its best. No one person can change an entire organization, but a small group of committed, consistent people can start to shift the tone. And that tone, repeated and amplified, starts to challenge the norms of toxicity. You don't need to fight everyone. You just need to protect the space where good people can breathe. In time, that space expands. It becomes proof that even in broken systems, trust and humanity can still exist. There comes a point in every difficult environment when you start to ask yourself a hard question: should I keep fighting for change, or is it time to walk away? That question doesn't come from weakness. It comes from awareness. It's the realization that your energy, your peace, and your values are on the line. Toxic work cultures have a way of convincing people that endurance is the same as strength. That if you stay long enough, if you just tolerate a little more, if you work harder, things will get better. But there's a difference between being strong and being numb. Strength means knowing what you stand for. Numbness means you've stopped feeling altogether. Staying in a toxic environment can be an act of courage, but only if you're staying for the right reasons. Staying is courageous when you still believe you can influence, when you see potential for change, when you're committed to being a voice of integrity in a space that's lost its way. It's courageous when you set boundaries, when you protect others from harm, when you choose to represent something better than what surrounds you. It's courageous when you're not staying out of fear or comfort, but out of conviction, because sometimes walking away is easy. Staying and trying to build something meaningful out of the wreckage takes real courage. But staying becomes dangerous when it starts to erode your sense of self. When you wake up every morning dreading where you're going. When you find yourself compromising your values just to get through the day. When you stop recognizing the person you're becoming in the process of surviving. That's when staying is no longer strength, it's surrender. Toxicity doesn't just drain your energy, it rewires your mind. It teaches you to expect less from people, to distrust kindness, to silence your own instincts. Over time, it chips away at your confidence until you start to believe the problem is you. That's when leaving becomes not just a choice, but an act of self-respect. Walking away doesn't mean you've failed to make a difference. It means you've learned to recognize when the system is too broken to support your growth. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do for yourself and for those still inside is to step out and lead by example from a distance. Leaving can show others that it's okay to demand better. It reminds people that they don't have to stay trapped in something that constantly breaks them down. And maybe, when enough people make that choice, those in power are finally forced to pay attention. Deciding to leave is never simple. It comes with guilt, with doubt, with fear of the unknown. You worry about being judged for giving up or letting others down. But there's a quiet power in choosing yourself. You are not obligated to sacrifice your peace for an environment that refuses to change. You are not required to dim your light to fit into a culture that punishes authenticity. The truth is, leaving is not a sign of weakness. It's often the first step toward healing. On the other hand, staying can be deeply meaningful if it's a conscious decision. If you choose to stay, stay with intention. Stay because you believe in something, not because you're afraid of the alternative. But staying requires strength. It requires emotional resilience, clarity, and boundaries. It means learning how to protect your mental health, how to recharge outside of work, how to not let bitterness become your identity. It means standing for something even when no one stands with you. That's what real courage looks like. Sometimes, the hardest part is knowing when to stop fighting. It's not a sign of defeat, it's an act of wisdom. Some battles are not meant to be won. They're meant to teach you where not to waste your time. There's honor in walking away from an environment that no longer serves your growth. And there's also honor in staying to create small change in the place you once wanted to run from. The key is awareness, knowing which choice aligns with your values, your peace, and your purpose. There's no universal answer. But the truth is, whether you stay or leave, what matters most is that you never let the environment decide who you become in the process. Every culture, good or bad, is the result of what people consistently choose to do. It's not written in stone. It's not decided in a boardroom. It's built in the small, daily moments when people decide how to speak, how to act, how to treat each other. Toxic cultures thrive when people go along with what they know is wrong, when they stay silent instead of standing up, when they choose comfort over courage. And just as toxicity spreads one decision at a time, so does change. Every shift, every movement towards something better begins when one person decides to show up differently. That's the quiet power most people underestimate. You might not have a title, you might not control policy or make big decisions, but you always control how you show up. You control the energy you bring into a meeting, the way you respond under pressure, the tone you set in a conversation. Those small things matter more than you think. Because culture isn't changed by slogans or mission statements. It's changed by behavior. And when someone consistently behaves with integrity, empathy, and authenticity, it disrupts the cycle of toxicity. Showing up differently doesn't mean becoming loud or confrontational. It means being intentional. It means listening when others talk instead of waiting for your turn to speak. It means treating people with respect even when no one else is watching. It means refusing to participate in gossip or blame games. It means acknowledging mistakes and taking responsibility when things go wrong. These are small actions, but they are radical in environments where fear and cynicism are the norm. They remind people that decency is still possible, that it still has a place. And over time, those actions start to shift the standard. In every toxic environment, there are people waiting for permission to be kind again. When you show up differently, you give them that permission without even realizing it. You make it safe for others to follow. And that's how change begins, not through grand speeches, but through example. When people see that you can succeed without stepping on others, when they see that you can lead without controlling, when they see that empathy doesn't make you weak, they start to question the culture they've been accepting. That questioning is the first crack in the wall of toxicity. It's easy to think that one person can't make a difference, but history has always proven otherwise. Every meaningful shift, whether in an organization, a movement, or a relationship, has started with one person deciding they've had enough of the way things are. They didn't wait for permission. They didn't wait for someone else to lead. They simply began acting in alignment with their values. And while that doesn't guarantee instant change, it creates a ripple effect. People start noticing. Some resist, but others lean in. Over time, those ripples become waves. Showing up differently also means being consistent, even when it's inconvenient. You can't preach respect and then talk about people behind their backs. You can't encourage openness and then punish honesty. You can't ask for trust while spreading fear. Real change requires integrity, the alignment between what you say and what you do. In toxic environments, inconsistency is the norm, and that's what erodes trust. But when you become the person whose words and actions match, others start to feel safe around you. Safety is the foundation of every healthy culture. The truth is, culture doesn't change when leadership changes. It changes when behavior does. And behavior changes when individuals choose to take responsibility for the energy they bring. That choice is powerful because it's contagious. The moment you choose to respond to frustration with calm instead of anger, you shift the emotional temperature in the room. The moment you choose to celebrate someone's success instead of envying it, you raise the bar for everyone else. The moment you choose to speak up for what's right, even when it's uncomfortable, you redefine what's acceptable. Those moments compound, they build momentum. Change will always feel slow at first. You'll question whether it's working, whether anyone notices, whether it's worth it. But change is rarely visible in the beginning. It starts beneath the surface, in the quiet shifts of trust, in the small moments of honesty, in the subtle ways people start to relax and show their true selves again. Then one day, you realize that people are communicating more openly, helping each other more willingly, smiling a little more. That's culture changing one person at a time. You can't wait for someone else to fix a toxic culture. You can't hope it will just improve on its own. The transformation begins when someone decides to live differently, to act differently, to lead differently. And even if you're the only one doing it for a while, that consistency becomes a light for others. Culture is just people. And people are shaped by the examples they see every day. When you show up differently, you remind everyone, including yourself, that change is possible even here, even now, even in the hardest places. Toxic work cultures don't destroy organizations overnight. They erode them quietly from the inside out through fear, silence, ego, and indifference. They thrive when people stop caring, when kindness is mistaken for weakness, and when survival replaces purpose. But the truth is, no culture, no matter how toxic, stays that way forever, because culture isn't some external force. It's a reflection of the people inside it. And people have the power to change. The moment you decide to stop participating in the toxicity, to stop feeding the gossip, to stop surrendering your voice, to stop pretending everything's fine when it isn't, you begin to rewrite the story. The moment you choose courage over comfort, you start creating something different. Change doesn't start in boardrooms or with policy memos. It starts in the hearts of individuals who decide to live by values instead of fear. That's how transformation begins. One choice, one person, one conversation at a time. Every act of integrity sends a ripple. Every moment of empathy challenges the norm. Every time you speak truth in a room that's used to silence, you remind people that integrity still has a voice. And when people start to see that being human isn't a liability but a strength, the culture slowly begins to heal. It doesn't happen in a week or a month, but it happens. Because people will always remember how you make them feel, even in environments that forget how to care. There's a kind of strength in refusing to become what surrounds you. You can be in a toxic environment without letting it define who you are. You can choose calm in chaos, compassion in conflict, authenticity in pretense. That choice doesn't just protect you, it inspires others. When people see someone stand tall in an environment that tries to shrink them, they start to believe they can do it too. That's leadership, not by position, but by example. And yes, there will be moments when it feels impossible, when your efforts seem invisible, when you question if any of it matters. But it does, because every time you show up differently, you plant a seed. Some will take root immediately. Some will take years. Some will bloom long after you're gone. But they will grow. That's the unseen legacy of courage. It outlives you. You can't control how others behave, but you can control how you show up. You can't always change the system overnight, but you can change the tone of the room you walk into. And when enough people make that choice, the culture shifts from the inside out. Because at its core, culture is not about rules or rewards, it's about relationships. It's about trust. It's about how people choose to treat each other when no one's watching. So, if you find yourself in a toxic environment, remember this: you don't have to mirror it. You don't have to lose yourself to survive it. You can rise above it, reshape it, or walk away from it. But whatever you do it consciously, do it courageously, and do it without losing your humanity. Because when you choose to lead with empathy and integrity in a place that has forgotten both, you don't just change the culture. You remind people that goodness still belongs here.